I'm going to call the P&G meeting to order, and first up is the approval of the minutes. Is there a motion?
I move that we approve the April 25th minutes.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? All right, that brings us to our two policy review items. The first is the 900 series, which is the school district community relations. Anybody have anything you wanted to talk about? I had two quick questions. The first is under 904.1, transporting students in private vehicles. I'm just a little confused about the language that we're adding in yellow. In addition, students are not allowed to ride to/from a district activity with a classmate, teammates, parent, or guardian. And then how that's going to interplay with the following sentence, which says, if the transportation provided by the district is declined, then the responsibility of getting the student rests on the parent. Are we really saying, but you can't have them ride with a friend's parent? I guess I'm just confused.
Sure,
like for sports and stuff.
That's, I understand that can be confusing. That's been our practice. We don't allow, because we have a lot of times, especially with way meets or games or activities where the students will ride the bus, but they'll want to ride home with their parents, and our stance has always been, you can do that, but you have to ride with your parent, and you cannot ride with the parents of somebody else, especially because the bus is there. So we're providing a transportation option, but my kids can't jump in the car with your kids to come home. That's what we don't allow. So I see that I can understand what you're
But are we just saying that to sort of put it out there that we don't allow it?
right.
But if the parent is doing it, because the rest of that sentence is that the responsibility and corresponding liability. So I read it as that we're saying we don't allow it. But if a parent says, screw what the district allows, get in the car with Lisa, we're not liable.
I like that
Yes.
interpretation.
That's how it works in
Yeah.
reality.
Well, that's what I was going to say.
Yeah.
You can't check every,
Right.
like a
Right.
track meet, I'm thinking.
I think that's just
Yeah.
our public stance that we do not allow that.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, I agree, and it's just not, it was a little bit unclear, and I would say just generally overall, there's not a lot of major changes in 900, it's just about trying to bring some clarity, and so this is a good example to start with. Trying to say, we're talking about, even when it's in a private vehicle, we're only going to do that if it's actually a school employee, which it didn't delineate that at the beginning, and so it's just going to the bottom to make it clear that we are not endorsing or saying it's okay to ride with that. But if a parent wants to say forget the policy, they explicitly know that it's something that they did.
Okay, but so we're not
No.
disciplining kids who skip out on the bus ride home from the track meet
No, we're not.
because they're violating this policy.
And of course, unfortunately, a lot of these policies and practices stem out of very terrible events, and this goes back to, I think, it's been a few years, but a Clear Creek Amana event where two kids were riding together and there was a terrible accident. And did one of them end up passing?
Yes.
And all the liability that created, so the states kind of cracked down on these policies, and that's have to be very much more explicit on what we're allowing, what we're providing, and where we are.
I only have a question in 903.1, the community groups section, where the first paragraph ends with the board will work closely with these groups. But then the last sentence is the principal acts, and I just lost it. The principal acts as the liaison to these groups. So between us and that attendance center, sort of contradicts that we're going to work closely, but the principal is the liaison. Does that make sense?
It does. I suggest we just take that last sentence of the first paragraph out.
Thank you.
All right. You with me, Kim?
Gotcha, yeah.
Okay.
The only other thing I had was a little typo in 905 904.1G1, which is the community use of school district buildings and grounds. If you go down to the 4th page, there's 2 nonprofit groups and then 3 use of district that we added. It should be benefit in the second, but it's BENE space T, if we could just,
FI,
did you see
yep.
that, Kim?
Yep. For some reason, we take a PDF and downloaded that FI. I thought I caught them all, but I didn't. Disappears.
Anybody else? Let's move on
I
to.
have a couple things.
You have a couple
I wanted to let everybody
things?
finish before I.
You're included in everybody and anybody else.
I'm trying to practice patience. That one that Lisa just pointed out, what is that? 905, 905, 1G1. No one really had any questions, but there's so much marking red and yellow on that because it really all relates to the facility use schedule, which is in there after that. And so we tried to delineate the different groups at the top. And we wanted to keep them broad because this we access more frequently, and then it gives us some flexibility. So it's not to take a shot at any of those groups that are listed there that we crossed off. It's just, hey, it's reflected here, and we want to have a better opportunity to try to delineate where folks fall into each group. We're also doing some work right now, and we don't think it needs to be in the policy, but it just happened that this week one of the things that came up is we had a nonprofit school partner that wanted to hold a fundraiser on our campuses for their own organizational benefit. So technically, under the facility use policy, right, they would have to pay no fees. But it's not to provide a service for our students, that's why we have that listed in there. So working on just some of our procedures of, this is for when you're providing services to benefit students, but if you're wanting to rent our facilities for your own gain, we are going to charge you under the actual nonprofit piece, not the profit, or not the school partnership piece. It doesn't impact the facility fee schedule at all. Just one of those things that you don't even know the circumstance happens till it exists. So Les and I and Kristen worked through that this week as one of the examples. The other big thing that I would like to talk with you just briefly about, and it is Kim, I thought this was going to make it easier. It's actually harder for me, but I do appreciate you printing this off for me. 904.2. So Matt's talked to you all a little bit about this in a couple of emails, advertising, promotion, and actually we added or selling of products in school. And this is for private organizations that want to come in and do that. Well, there's just a policy and there's no real regulation or way to judge those associated with it. So it's still in draft form, which is why we haven't included it. But we are working through a rubric that we will complete so that we can give you our best thinking on whether or not we should allow for the promotion, the solicitation, or the selling of products inside the school building. And I just wanted to put this in front of you so you could see it and have an opportunity to look at it and some of the things that we're going to consider as we look at these different requests. We're trying to keep it pretty broad because the requests vary all the way from someone that wants to offer a direct benefit to our employees for their 403B planning, which is one that Matt brought you, Jim Berry, to private companies wanting to sell things to our students. And how do you make sure that you capture enough of the different categories so we're just covering our bases? And it's not necessarily that we don't want companies to do this, but for most of the things that we do, we have processes in place. It's why we contract with companies. It's why we do RFPs, is so we can make sure these services in our building. And so a lot of these are for those one-offs or other opportunities where it's something that we haven't seen as a need across the district or haven't contracted with a large company to do. Matt and I have been together in the district for almost a decade and have not seen very many of these, and we've seen 2 in the last 3 months of companies that just kept coming back to us. And we finally came across this policy and started to build it out, but it's just it's funny how those things happen. You don't run into it forever, and then all of a sudden you have two within the course of one trimester.
And part of it, I think, is us learning about what's actually happening at
Right.
the buildings. Like,
Oh,
these are
that's
two
true,
we
too.
know about, right? And so there may be more, but part of it is without policy or without some guidance, we're a little bit limited in how we even advise the buildings on how to handle these requests or how they should be thinking about these requests when it comes to them. So these are two we're aware of, that either buildings have raised the question or the group or individual has raised the question. And so we're kind of looking for some direction and guidance on, but also putting our best foot forward about how we think we can try to evaluate some of these, but understanding they're for profit, some of them may not meet our guidelines all the time through the day, but there may be windows of time that they meet some of our guidelines, or, it makes more sense if it's somebody soliciting to our staff about when we'd allow that, or if it's a product that's being solicited to our students about when that would be offered or allowed. And so there's some intersection with other policies that you can tell that we kind of have started thinking through below as well.
Yeah, I'm glad we're doing this. I'm still trying to figure out if it does everything we just described, and I think you just said there are other policies that are involved here, because this one's strictly about advertising and promotion, not soliciting. Those are two different things, right? Like advertising and promoting using our name versus, like if it's a product, and the product never takes on any of our promotional material, our name or anything, that's still being filtered into the students in some way, whether it's a product that they eat or drink or wear. That's different than what this 904.2 seems to be talking about.
You're reading the same thing I am. Yeah, so the title of the policy is the 904.2 is advertising promotion, but then we did have, it looks like an add-in of or selling such products. Are we
Right.
suggesting that because of this, Jace?
And
Is
then
that an ad? That's what I thought.
that's part of
Yeah.
the ad, right, is the
Yeah.
ad, and then, I hear what you're saying,
I might change
Yeah.
the name of the,
That's
policy.
change the
Sure.
overall name to include selling then too,
Yeah.
right? Or soliciting, yeah.
because it is different than just
Mhm.
the advertising and promotion.
Yeah, I see what you're saying now.
I think this is really good. I'm
Yeah.
just making sure it's really
That the
clear.
name of the policy matches with what we
That
want.
makes sense.
okay.
And then I think the big push is going to be, the emphasis needs to be on making sure that all the buildings know that this exists and that they need to use it. I think going through kind of rubric is so helpful. At least that works really well for my brain. Be able to ask those questions, yes, no, oh, okay, so this is promoting or this is soliciting. Because it's not always so obvious. Like you're saying, you've been here forever and maybe this kind of thing has happened before. It just wasn't obvious.
Right. Well, and it's not, and we added in that piece of have we contracted this out or do we do an RFP, because I just happen to be driving, up by Liberty High School, and it's probably been there forever, but because I've been working on this, I just caught the fact, there's a huge Nike swoosh
I was just
right underneath the line, and I drove by,
Wait a second, there's a huge.
and I had this,
Back in there,
I
I
had
on the
this,
back of the scoreboard.
Liberties.
Oh.
facing.
and I had this, what the, kind of moment, right?
It's new.
And we talked about, well, what about all this advertising we do on our scoreboards? Well,
That's, yeah.
we bring a contract to you every
Yeah.
year. And so we partner with an outside entity, we sign a contract to bring us some profit, and that company also gets a profit, to control all of that advertising. And so it doesn't fall under this because or it would, and be like, no, this is a service we contract, and so we'd have them go through that process. And there'll probably be some of those that slip through the cracks where we haven't identified everything, but we're trying to make it broad enough so that we can capture and at least get the notes as we try to go through it.
So, the way this is formulated now, if a company that stands for something that we don't, it's not in conformity with our values as a district, wants to advertise, do we have a way of addressing that?
As of right now,
Yeah.
the board can just say no. I mean, the policy's been here for a long time. We just haven't used it very often, Charlie.
Right.
If you're a for-profit company, the board, they're technically supposed to get the board's approval. We haven't been doing that.
Yeah, I saw that sentence and I
Yeah.
could remember a time in the last 4 years that I voted on a request for advertising.
Well, the only one would be the scoreboard, right? We put that in front of you to do that, but like these requests, you know, we haven't officially put in front of you guys for approval, and I think the other then catch on these, so we can go through and evaluate this, but then it's still, I mean, based on even these yes, nos, it's still gonna be a recommendation to us about, or from us to you.
About
Right.
what you do with the rubric.
Right.
Right, yeah, you answer the
Score,
questions
yeah.
and it gives you some additional information, but then we're still having to kind of evaluate each of them as they
We
come.
bring them as a recommendation on.
Yeah, we'd say,
okay,
well, we
you can
recommend
explain
approval or
why
no.
you're
Yeah.
recommending or not recommending something.
But Charlie, we also have been inconsistent. And like I said, we've had some people that come, have not been in our building, so they've made requests to us in the last couple months, so it's come up. But we can think of some organizations that we consider really good partners, either through the foundation or through the district directly, that are doing things that probably qualify as advertising or soliciting that we've kind of just turned a blind eye to. Hills Bank brings cookies at the beginning of every year and puts them in our schools and here at the ESC.
And talks to the staff.
Yeah, that's technically advertising.
Yeah.
And to your point, we want to have a way to keep organizations that don't align with our values out. And we figured we just needed to really go with something that would help us do that. And the Hills example is one that's just been ingrained for so long. I look at Molly because, I mean,
Yes.
Yeah, that's good.
you know, and so so whether or not we make some of those go back through it, I don't know.
Yeah.
But that's what we're trying
That's a
to
big.
standardize.
Well, and do you guys, I mean,
Or maybe,
I don't think, I have no personal,
Yeah.
you know, stake in it one way or another, but do you feel like that's something you guys should be approving every time? Like a contract's one thing, but these other requests, I mean, is that something you'd want us evaluating and just approving or not approving if we had some guidelines around it? Because that's another, you know, that could become another lobbying effort, right? If we even put you a recommendation that says no, then you could get a group of people here saying why they think you should approve it.
Personally, I would say no, because like other things, we sort of tell you all what our thoughts and concerns are and let you do the work, because I can see where that can probably be somewhat of a bottleneck. If every single thing they have to bring to us and wait for a board meeting to go through, especially when it's a partnership that's beneficial to us, like the Hills relationship, that they do a lot with the foundation that ultimately benefits our kids. So I think it will be things that, like Charlie brought up, that you know in talking with board members that don't align with our values or don't align with where we want the district to be headed with, and they fill out this rubric and you have a recommendation, you bring it forward. Does that make sense?
A little bit until you said the end of it. Like, I guess what I'm getting at is, do you just want me to approve them or not approve them?
Yeah.
do we
And
want to
then
change
keep it
this?
out of your
Yes.
hair, unless
Yes.
it's some kind of a financial
I
commitment.
trust you to do that.
But
You
here's
know,
the
yeah.
concern, sorry, go ahead.
Well, I think you're in a great position to do that. So, yeah, I think if you have a policy in a form, that's, you know, that should be your decision. We don't need to.
And you guys would inform the, kind of just that initial part Ruthina is talking about, you know, we'd want to have some information from you about what are the parameters, the guardrails that we should be operating inside of, but if we could take over definitely approving them or saying no, and that would avoid then having to bring these singular issues to the board. But I know, Maka, you were
Yeah.
gonna say what's.
Here's the concern, is I view our board's job as protective in some sense. We don't want, I don't want the administration to be vulnerable to criticism for being the arbiter of who is said, yes, you can advertise, no, you can't. So for me, I kind of want to know, I want you guys to think about this a little bit more and decide, first of all, are we going to write down those parameters in a policy so that you guys can lean on it? I would if I were you.
I think that would be needed if we were
Okay.
gonna do it, yep.
Yeah, and then, so those parameters are gonna be tricky. Because it's not just gonna be someone who's gonna try to like sell methamphetamine, that's not the company I'm worried about.
No.
The company I'm worried about might be a religious affiliated one, all right? Just wants to do something about feeding the homeless, but they've got a cross on it, all right? There's gonna be some, there will be things like that come up. So do we want our admin to be subject to that? Or do we want the elected officials who are supposed to have to deal with that? You know, like that's supposed to be our job. We're supposed to be the ones that we protect our admin from those political decisions, because that's how we get
But if our
elected.
policy is very, that
Clear.
have some of those parameters in there.
It's-
But I think that's the best chance at threading the needle, right? If the policy informs how we're making those decisions,
Right.
then that's where we have the anchor point to go back to say, we're following what policy is. I mean, that's how we arbiter the transfer decisions,
Yep.
you know, that come in front of us, so, as one example. So I think that could work.
I also wonder if there's just a little finer thread on the needle, which is they make the decision, but there's an appeal right to the board. So that we are not dealing with the yeses and the routine, but if there is a controversial one,
We give them an out.
then they, and they say no to,
Mhm.
then it comes to us. And so
But
we
then I
won't,
think that becomes back to the problem that, well, I don't care.
But that's the transportation
Yeah.
system.
because I mean,
That is the transportation.
well, and I was
system.
thinking of
That's-
the athletic eligibility, same
Yeah,
one.
that is,
Yeah.
that people
'Cause I
come
don't-
and they will still lobby
Yeah.
and they will share their story or their concern, and we will have people that will do that if we go that route, knowing that this is what our admin is recommending and here's why. And, I mean, you follow me that, it's
Yeah.
just gonna happen.
It'll
but I
happen,
think-
but that's a good check and balance too, right? I mean, that's the
Well-
check on us to make sure we're following the policy so that we should feel confident if they do appeal to you, that we're confident we followed what you put in front of us. And if you want to decide against your own policy, then that's your prerogative,
Right.
right?
And I think to Monica's point, like, sometimes the buck should stop with us and not the admin team. That's kind of the job that we wear on our shoulders, and I think it'll make the public feel like the system is more transparent and accessible if at the end of the day, they can be heard in a public setting before the seven of us.
So an appeal should be in there.
Yeah, but I don't wanna like approve cookies every year, you know, or like,
Right.
that,
Did you say Jostens too? I didn't hear that. You said that.
We don't do Jostens, I think we do Harrison.
We do Halverson.
Yeah.
no, for the
But
year.
that's what I'm
Oh, for the year
saying.
programs.
I'm talking
Oh,
about
for like
Gallon.
green.
Yeah, senior.
Oh,
Yeah.
yeah.
It's
Yeah.
another long-standing, but I don't know if we have sort of an agreement with them or.
Yeah, we sort of do, but every year, I would say I heard from at least one or two parents, because we trot all the seniors down for an assembly with Carl Stern, or whoever it is now, talking about the Justin's products that they
Yeah.
can buy,
Oh, geez.
you know, and, you know, he gives us free gallon, gallons right and left all the time, I mean, he's very generous with that.
We do.
But
Yeah,
they
it's
can buy
board
class
approved.
rings.
It's
and
board
all-
is.
I
Adam
know.
says it's board approved.
That contract.
Yeah, we have a contract with them, that's what I was
That we
thinking too,
allow
so
them
that,
to present all their material?
Okay.
I'm sure it's in the contract.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh.
Okay.
I mean, I guess I'm just trying to think what could be a terrible situation is to have two corporations in here lobbying us.
Yeah, that would be.
Like,
bad.
you know,
Well,
I don't know, like a lot
I don't
of
think
stuff.
that you'll see that happening.
JD, it's not just that. The other thing that comes to my mind is, especially around athletics, as the world of NIL
Yeah.
matriculates down to high school, is I think there's going to be more and more pressure, whether it's, you know, under the radar or just kind of in your face about trying to get kids to adopt brands. And I think we need to protect our kids in this circumstance because the NIL rules around high school are much more strict than they are around college. And the kiddos can get in trouble in a hurry and be punished pretty severely. And so I think this is another way for us to protect some of our student athletes too. I agree. I don't think we're gonna have companies coming and doing that, but it's just one more way for us to improve our systems, really. And I think this is about, I think this is at the end of the day is about system improvement and, agreed, we need a regulation, just didn't get to that part of it, but the feedback I've gotten, we can definitely write a reg that I think does what
Well-
you all are asking us to do.
Yeah.
In JP's point, I mean, I think that's another thing administratively, we would, I would need to double check if we thought about putting it on here the first time or not, but if a school comes to us with something they want to do, I think we'd have a responsibility to ask the question, okay, have you only heard from this provider? Have you talked to multiple providers that want to solicit? You know, I mean, why are you going to put this one in front of our kids? Like, if it's their idea, right? And so I do think, you know, that's part of our system we work through before we recommend something to you guys. We have to evaluate others out. And so I think there's some way to language that too, so that it doesn't become lobbying to the board. It's really, okay, have we done the work on the front end with that as well?
'Cause that would be the concern, right? Somebody goes, has a friend somewhere and they're a coach and they get, and now and it becomes like, is it Reebok or Nike? I mean, I don't even, you know, I don't know that world very well or how those folks operate, but
I think my biggest concern is just having this policy in place and finding good ways to enforce it. I think we have to remember, Ruthina was just talking about, you know, the picturing the people come in, Jostens coming in, for example, and showing these goods. Or for me, it's more of the sports stuff, showing them the sports stuff. First of all, 3/4 of the kids can't afford what they're getting shown, and that stinks, okay? And then the other thing is, kids are kids and they're vulnerable to information, and we're not there all the time. I mean, sometimes the parents are there, but I mean, sports has to do with their bodies, and that's a really big deal. So for me, this policy is extremely important.
So I think we definitely have some more work to do on it, but I think we heard some things about the parameters. I think we're kind of amenable to the idea where we would evaluate the request up or down based on those parameters, and then an appeal option to the board from that standpoint. So we have some more work to do on it, but we knew we would have some. We just wanted to bring it to you guys that we've, you know, like Chase said, 10 years, don't remember dealing with one, and now we've had two in a couple months. And so, yeah.
Well, like Chase said, this NIL stuff, I was talking to Fran McCaffrey about it, the impact it had already in such a little time on college sports. It will trickle down. Every single
Yeah.
high school athlete now knows how that college sport thing's working. It is blowing up. So we do have to be on our toes for it. So I'm glad you have your eye on it, and I know you have had your eye on it.
Thanks.
Okie dokie. There were two policy primers really quick. Did we want to say anything about those?
I think the only thing to just note is one of them, I'm trying to pull up which one specifically talks to you guys. One is about CUME file maintenance, and the other one talks about social media use of board members. And so probably just in particular want to pay attention to that one and the balance there, and just make sure you've read that. But that was a suggestion from IASB. I'm sure you can tell in our polarized political environment some entanglements that board members are getting themselves into statewide with comments they post online. And so, of course, that's not talking about just sharing good news from the district or positive things. It's other items. But I think that's the only thing, just to summarize, just to make sure you're aware of.
Yeah. All right. Then that brings us to our last thing, which is our next P&G meeting. Do we take the summer off for P&G also?
Yep.
All right.
All committees, we pause.
Wow.
so it'll be August.
It'll be August 22nd will be our next P&G meeting.
Great.
All right. Is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second? Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Thanks, guys. Thanks, guys.